Well, here we are, a few months into 2014, and still just a few months into the new console cycle. One argument I keep hearing over and over again from PC gamers is, why would you buy a next-gen console when you can just build a PC for the same cost and get better performance? Well, I'm not entirely convinced that that's something you can do. So what myself and my colleague Mark Walton in the UK are going to do is we're each going to build a PC for the same cost as an Xbox One in the highest tax state in the United States. With a budget of about $550, we're going to buy every component you need, including, GPU, CPU, mouse, keyboard, and Windows, and see if you can actually build a PC that will perform better than a next-gen console without breaking your budget. Here are the parts we're working with.
The most obvious part to go for is the operating system first. Although I have a personal aversion to the Metro user interface, I decided to go with Windows 8 because there's a better chance Microsoft will support it further into the future than Windows 7. It's easy to go overboard on a mouse, but as long as it tracks movement and has 2 buttons and a scroll wheel, I should be able to play all games without a problem. I also shied away from wasting money on a keyboard by avoiding unnecessary features. Again, I opted for a Roswell product that's functional enough to get the job done. My choice of a motherboard was based on a few key factors. First, it had to support Intel's LGA 1155 CPU socket so that I could have a wide range of new processors to choose from. Secondly, it had to feature a PCI Express 3.0 slot to ensure I wasn't bottlenecking the graphics card. BioStar's H61MG-V3 satisfied both of these needs. Choosing this board came at the cost of a few features, but on the plus side, it was cheap, and the micro ATX form factor meant I could build a relatively small machine to boot. Once I established that I was building a machine around a micro ATX board, I searched for a small and cheap case, and luckily enough, I found one that came paired with a 300-watt power supply. Most gaming PCs require a bit more juice to power high-end CPUs and GPUs, but I'm building on the cheap. NVIDIA's GTX 750 Ti is a mighty card for $160 from EVGA, and it doesn't draw too much power, which means it'll work nicely with my cheap power supply. GPUs are the most important item in a gaming PC build, and even though I would have liked to have spent a little bit more money on a stronger card, I couldn't really spend any more given my budget. Most people default to Intel's Core line of CPUs when building a PC, but again, I'm on a budget, and so long as I have a few cores to play with, I should be in good enough shape. Plus, it was cheap at only $80. Choosing RAM was easy. For most of the games I'll be testing, I needed at least 4 GB. I don't need it to be particularly fast, though I opted for 2 sticks instead of 1 in order to take advantage of 2 memory channels for increased bandwidth. The final piece to the puzzle is the hard drive. Western Digital's Blue drives are inexpensive and reliable, and I was able to purchase a serial ATA hard drive with 500 GB of storage while ultimately staying below my budget. Alright, that's it for the parts. Let's put this PC together.
All right, we were working with some cramped space inside of this little box, and cable management is almost non-existent given the limitations of such a cheap kit, but we've got it all put together. Let's see how it works with Assassin's Creed 4.
Assassin's Creed 4 proved to be the most taxing game of the bunch, forcing me to disable motion blur, ambient occlusion, and volumetric fog, but it still performed admirably compared to the Xbox One version rendered at 900p and 30 frames per second. Frame rates on the PC took the most noticeable dive during synchronization points, but it still performed as good as or better than the PlayStation 4 version, which is rendered at a fixed 30 frames per second at 1080p. After struggling to push Assassin's Creed 4's graphical settings, it was great to see our PC handle Thief with such ease. Granted, we weren't able to max out the settings, but the game looked great on high and maintained 60 frames per second at 1080p, blowing both consoles out of the water. Apart from lowering a few settings that were bound to tax the CPU, such as impact marks and ragdoll physics, Titanfall ran beautifully at 1080p on high settings compared to the Xbox One at 792p. We had to disable anti-aliasing in order to achieve high frame rates, but as a result, the game hovered between 50 and 60 frames per second during normal play, and around 45 seconds during scenes with exceptionally long draw distances. Before our tests, I expected Battlefield 4 to be the most taxing game of the lot. But as it turned out, we were able to keep most settings on high without the frame rate dipping below 40. Again, we had to avoid flourishes such as ambient occlusion, but like the rest of the games in our test, it still looked better overall than its console counterparts.
All right, I admit it, I was skeptical going into this challenge, but the results speak for themselves. For $550, the highest cost of an Xbox One in the United States, we've built an Intel and NVIDIA-based PC that outperforms both the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One in cross-platform games. And if we had a little bit more money, we could have bought just a few components that would have made a much larger difference. And it goes without saying, PC gaming library is huge. And when you think of all the other things a PC can do that consoles can't do, the value speaks for itself. But as it stands, from a gaming perspective, we've built a PC that outperforms both next-gen consoles for the highest price of the Xbox One. For GameSpot, I'm Peter Brown. See you next time.